So the first thing I want to talk about, I have two major sections that I want to visit with you guys. The first is diagnostic analytics. And I want to talk about business intelligence, the concept of model promotion, and I want to touch on briefly right at the end the concept of the modern data warehouse, or from a Gartner standpoint, they actually call it the logical data warehouse. So to use a few metaphors, a lot of us think about, especially folks that really love business intelligence and enterprise data warehousing, think of BI as a bullet train. You know, it is fast, it is sleek, you know, there's no better way, sub-second query times, the best service, and things like that. I think that's true, but it's a little bit idealistic, because what happens with trains is that you get off them and you still have to go someplace. They don't bring you the last mile. You know, you still have to get in a cab, or you still have to walk, or things like that. So it's a little bit true around, to use a transportation metaphor, about how people deal with data. You've got all kinds of different people in your environment that have different data needs. You know, the runners up in the upper left-hand corner, they may be your Excel jockeys that just love to deal with data and crunch it and get it themselves, and they don't really, you know, they do it for fun sometimes, not because they have a question they actually need to ask. They're all about procuring and manicuring it and doing fun things with it and new visualizations. The upper right, the bike commuters, they're more utilitarian. It's like, oh, I've got to get an answer to this. I live in you know, Excel hell and have to deal with all these things, and they just don't love it nearly as much as the runners do. You know, got the Segway people down there. They're the mobile and tablet users. You know, everything needs to be really intuitive. They just lean into it, and they want the semantic model, and it's all, you know, kind of delivered up to them. And then you've got the bikers down in the lower right-hand corner, and they're not going to be conformist ever. They're always going to work outside of IT and likely outside of other business constructs. The reality is that is reality. That you're not going to get away from that. You're going to have different needs. And the sooner that you understand that and try and embrace that, you'll prevent your BI from, you know, looking like this type of a train. So this is a really great slide that I am using of Microsoft's, because I used to have about 10 slides that do what this amazing PowerPoint engineering feat of a slide does. And it talks about kind of what's happened with the evolution of BI. You know, we've got the IT pro down the lower left-hand corner because BI is generally owned by IT. But now we've got this thing, you know, the whole left side is corporate BI, the whole right side is self-service BI. And the end users live over in the self-service world, because whether they're consuming it from the corporate BI or other means, you know, that's up to them as to where they're getting their answers from. So corporate BI looks a lot like this. This is all stuff you guys live and breathe probably on a daily basis if you own these types of systems. We've got existing data that live in line of business applications. They live in other data marts, wherever they might have come from, and various files that are spread all over your environment. We go through this processing or procurement process. That's data staging, that you do your ETL and data quality, maybe some master data management in there, and you put all that stuff and persist it into an Uber relational data warehouse. Maybe you put analysis services cubes on top of it, or some type of OLAP technology to get better query response time, to get more intuitive access to it, and then you provision it. You put it out into dashboards, you have a reporting user interface, you've got slice and dice, and then that makes its way to end users. But the reality is that this whole process takes a lot of engineering, it takes a lot of cost. And going back to the big data slide, talking about, and the key trend slide that I started out with, talking about how quickly data is exploding and expanding, well, it's not realistic to put everything through the corporate BI. process. And so what we have is that whether you like it or not, your end users are now provisioning data themselves. They're getting it from the files directly, from the source systems, from outside of your environment. And the big question is that, is it possible to have control and agility? Well, if you ignore that this is going on, you're never going to have any control, and you're never going to be actually able to extract the value out of the fact that people have these needs and are going to do these things. The best thing to do is to understand that there's this huge chasm in between individual BI and corporate BI. And that's what I want to talk about. The solution to that is what I call model promotion. I've called it other things. I'm not on a Gartner kick this morning, but I have spent lots of time talking to different folks over there. And a guy named Kurt Schlegel over there likes the term model promotion. And it's the whole, it's the idea that models live in your environment, whether they be something that, that a person spins up in a spreadsheet and visualizes something based on one spreadsheet, or whether it be a dashboard that you've procured in corporate BI and pushed out. Those are two different types of models, an individual model versus a corporate BI model. So, using another metaphor, teenagers is a good metaphor because, looking at the room, we've all been teenagers at some point. And we know that teenagers like to try things out. And sometimes that's where learning and experience come from. And I'm of the school that if my teenager's going to go try something out or be crazy, I would rather have a nice sandbox at home, a playroom in the basement that is a safe environment to invite friends over, to make my house the place where things happen, so that when things take a left-hand turn, I can be there for those precious teaching moments and have a little bit of control and have a little bit of agility as well. And so, in the most positive way and not demeaning way at all, I like to think of end users as they're teenagers. They're young and experiencing what data. They're perpetual teenagers because they're always dealing with new data. They're always dealing with new business problems. So there's never going to be a real maturity level that comes with that just because of the parameters of it. So looking at organizational maturity of BI in your environment, thinking of it from the having the safe rec room in the basement or playroom in the basement so that you can have some control and agility, is saying let's recognize that there are models that are going to exist across 3 different levels of maturity. So I like to divide BI up into individual and corporate. Notice the 2 sides of the chasm, but I throw departmental in the middle there. You can call it whatever you want to, but it's for our discussion today. And the reality is that at the individual level, models are going to be created. They're going to have to answer some question. Somebody asked them a question that they need to know the answer of, depending on what their role is. They need to personally make a business decision. There's a crisis that's happening, and they need to process that. The whole Ebola epidemic, is a healthcare nightmare. But when a crisis like that happens, all of a sudden there's new questions that need to be asked, and all kinds of data needs to be crunched to answer those. Well, it starts out at an individual level because somebody has to solve it. And if it's just a one-time thing, well, then it just kind of becomes an orphan. It gets thrown out and never used again. Or if it's wrong, or there's no reason that they need to share it with anyone else, it just persists as individual BI. But a lot of the time, it has value outside of just one individual. And that's when it's got value to a group. And it needs to be promoted to a departmental level. And whatever group name you want to call it, we'll call it a department. And then that's because that question might be asked again, or it has value for more than one individual. And some things live and breathe and persist forever at the departmental level because it has no value or adoption level above that group. But where you see high adoption, or you recognize brilliance, or usually it's around the adoption piece, is that if something's popular, most likely it belongs in corporate BI. Most likely your enterprise data warehouse, corporate data warehouse, ODS, whatever you call your main system and overall storage of enterprise data, needs to have facility for these new models. And so if you look at individual BI and departmental BI as the specifications for your version next of corporate BI, then you're able to extract value out of that. This is all good, this is all well, because corporate BI gets pushed down. These are the things I was just talking through. I didn't click through my slide here. Corporate BI gets pushed down. I didn't fully explore that in the fact that once you build corporate BI, it's built with a certain lens. And regardless of who a person is in the organization, they only have access to certain data, and it's organized only a certain way, and only certain business logic has been applied to it. So it's a corporate lens, which is what it is. It's just recognize its limitations. And so therefore, whenever anybody needs something outside of that is when they're going to build their individual models. And then sometimes through adoption, they'll become departmental models. And if you have a healthy environment and set of tools for it, then you can hopefully take those departmental models and adopt them at the corporate level. So that's when I want to step away from just conceptual, high-level talking and say where the rubber meets the road with this is back with the metaphor with the teenagers in the rec room, and then me talking about tool sets, is that you need to make sure that you have a tool set that has a high level of adoption at the individual level, that supports people doing what they need to do at an individual level, that allows them to collaborate at a departmental level, and then allows you to take a model from a departmental level and take it to a corporate level. Because these things are going to happen, and that was my whole theme to this point, is that these things are happening in your environment, they're going to happen, and if you embrace them, embracing them is not just saying, okay, that's all right, they're going to happen, I'm not going to try and stop them if you're somebody at the IT side that may try and push back on it. It's more than that. It's saying, how can I adopt a platform that facilitates individual, departmental, and corporate BI? Otherwise, I'm going to lose the value and the brilliance that's happening at the individual and departmental level. Those things will happen and I will never know about it. And that means you don't know about all the individual needs. You don't know how far, you don't know where to put your next train station to go back to the train model. Because at the beginning I was talking about the train and it only goes from point A to point B with a few stops in between. And if you don't know where to build the next rail line with your corporate BI, you're going to have really missed the mark. Lastly, in talking about diagnostic BI and model promotion, I wanted to talk about the modern or logical data warehouse. I could talk for 45 minutes on this alone. I won't. I'm going to talk for a slide on it just to make sure that the concept isn't ignored, because it goes hand in hand with what I'm talking about. Because this is what your enterprise or corporate BI looks like right now. It's back to your source systems, to your ETL, to your relational data warehouse and cubes, all out to your visualization to your end users. And then I already talked in the evolution of BI slide about the reality that end users are now grabbing all kinds of data that lives other places. Well, you need to be open to the construct or be actively pursuing a technology decision where you have a logical or modern data warehouse, and you understand and architect for the fact that data is going to live outside of your environment, and it's going to live in a lot of different forms. It's not all going to be procured. It's not all going to be pushed through an ETL with logic applied to it, and cleansing, and all the things that me as an old school BI guy really want to have happen. You know, this is a stretch for me in this day and age also, is to say, gosh, we've got to build facility for models at the corporate level that allow people to have access to data that sometimes you don't have direct control over, and are bringing in. And so your overall data warehouse needs to transcend those old school technologies, as well as all under your provision. I will say that it's very interesting that there's been a lot of talk about the logical data warehouse, and then Microsoft has adopted the terminology, the modern data warehouse, which is synonymous with that. And Microsoft is the only vendor right now that actually makes a technology solution that allows you to truly implement a logical data warehouse. They actually have a product called Analytical Processing System. It used to be called PDW, that has a query engine called Polybase. And it will allow you to query relational data store in the same query and join to big data Hadoop, whether it's stored locally or in a different, you know, in the cloud or in an Apache cluster. And you can actually build this without having to roll your own. And that's an interesting thing, an FYI. I don't want to go too far in technical nuts and bolts, but be aware that that's there, and Microsoft is actually above and beyond other vendors in this space because of Polybase. Very interesting and fascinating.